Hello, my name is Tim Gager, and welcome to Virtual Fridays, to our literary series. And tonight, my feature is Danielle Zaccagnino. Is that all right? Did I do that
Good
well?
job, yeah.
I practiced it. Behind the scenes, before you guys get here and watch this, I went over this multiple times to get the name correct. So I'm looking forward to Danielle, and thank you for people that are tuning in live for the live feed. But this is one thing that we do take a look at is her bio, and here is her bio. So hang on, it might take a while to read it. It says Danielle Zaccagnino is from Queens, New York. Her first book, Supposed Muscles, Supposed Night, Suppose This Is August, is available for pre-order from Mason Jar Press. So, without any further verbiage from me, Danielle Zaccagnino.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting, Tim. Thanks for having me. Um, the book came out in November, actually, but this is my first reading since then. I was sort of hibernating for a while and having a wild mix of feelings about the book being released. This is kind of getting my feet wet back into readings again. So the book is a hybrid of poetry and lyric essays. I'm just going to read the poems tonight for the sake of time. And I'm going to start with one called Lullaby for the Nervous. Just some background. I grew up in a very loud, very crazy Italian American family in Queens. And I was kind of the, shy, nervous little girl who, always wanted to like find a quiet little place to hide out. So this book is in many ways about anxiety, and the essays are about finding ways to escape that. So I have one essay about edibles, and one essay about therapy, and one about going on medication, one about a long distance marriage, one about Twin Peaks, as you can probably see it here. I'm a big Twin Peaks fan, and just all the ways that that kind of that show kind of reflects the craziness going on in my mind. So I'll start us off with Lullaby for the Nervous. And I'm reading straight from the book, so sorry that I'm not looking up at all of you on screen. 1. Lately, I've been hiring the moon to spy on me in my sleep, just to make sure I'm still there. 2. Swanning my neck, I squint to better see her pepper milk, extend my tongue, think of lapping it up. 3. Should it worry me that my pulse is unwieldy? I've never lived in a country where I didn't speak the language. 4. I write myself a letter. If you love anxiety so much, why don't you marry it? 5. Me and anxiety. We walked down the aisle at noon to an empty room. We had friends, but we didn't want them there. I wore a beige bodysuit. She wore sequins and fur, just as striking as the day we met. High-heeled, we listened to Morrissey. What difference does it make? 6. Once I heard hundreds of years from now, people would trace their digital lineage back to us, beginning of a new world. 7. I ask myself, if the mattress is teeming with tadpoles or maggots, what's so bad about being made out of sand? 8. In Cosmic Comics, Calvino's moon is a wet dream, more celebrity than spy. Yes, she shines. 9. In the morning, I'll gather tree roots with my spoons, sink my hands into the mud. 10. In the morning, I'll still be here. In the morning, I'll be fine. And I have a series in this book that I think of as the Good Girl series. It sort of explores that pressure to be a people pleaser and to be perfect, and trying to get past that. Good girl with a hammer. I'm the one I buried deep in hand-stitched pocks of earth. The threat of birth, like the thread of death, continues to force my hand. Good girl in the dirt, eager to please. Good girl in the rafters. When all you have is shame, everything looks like a hammer. But there's something to be said for that sensation. Dear diplomat, dear daughter, when has devotion ever been perfect? Who can write a whole song by heart? I've had enough near misses to last a lifetime. So read my lips like a prayer card. saint of knobby knees and twist-turned feet, swing hard, swing loose. And if you find me making too many commands, understand it as a groping for power, as a momentary lapse of self-consciousness. Celebrate that small triumph. Good girl with a habit. It was the first time they'd seen fire. She put it in her mouth. A glowing touchstone, shy violet pawing at the past. She asked the world which still loved her, who still loved her. Spiked with pine, champagne, fever. On a rooftop, she was one of many, holed and held in, gilded. They lived in the flood times. They talked about adding value, the study in ballet, in waves, the tiny vicious things on their tongues. The girl through the night grinds her premonitions while her lover stands in the doorway, sculpted. She matches his energy and meaning. She cries while he lowers the bricks onto her legs, though she's asked him to. Jesus bleeding through the pacifier, strangers bleeding in her bed. It's like leaves, it's like lavender. Starry night, this is her usual bewilderment. Sorry night, God drew her pitchfork spine. Billboard. I know you know the armor I slapped together some nights, woman blown up and billboarded, stud pierced and ghost smoking, an ad for arrogance and cocktails. Beneath I'm a combination of my aunt and a zombie and Johnny Depp at the end of Cry Baby. Burst blood vessels, lily liver, shallow breathing, trying to remove all distancing phrases. Throughout history, I've been scared of scope and scale. Let's table it. I can't bear much time in the limelight, rind soaked in vodka, I'm death burned in feedstock. Open your books to page 11. Sometimes I have to lift my breast to breathe. Sometimes I dream myself untoothed in the nursery, filling my pockets with pureed peas and spaghetti sauce. This next one is about finding out that somebody that I had grown up with died of an overdose. And it's called Now When I Hear Body Farm. I was living in San Marcos, Texas at the time, at Texas State University. There's a body farm nearby where they study the decay of bodies. It's just a laboratory. Instead of Bunsen burners, they stock up on limbs, learn about decay, how bodies change under aberrant conditions, how to tell time since death. 2 hours, she told me through a text. Now when I hear body farm, I see WM, half in the ground, arms out, a scarecrow with pinpoint pupils, a blue smile. He starts to grow toward vultures, decompose. Here it's business as usual. I can see the man, straw hat, red and denim, spitting but graceful, shoot scag into the soil, scatter pills like seeds. It's just a lab, stick to data. Who collects the bodies and how long do they keep them? What are the odds that a bottle of pills would empty by accident? And what kind of man would grow a friend dead? And will this soil ever be wet? Heroish is German for powerful. Now when I hear heroin, she's telling the children, not too much at once. Now when I hear no body, no blue. Now when I hear tolerance, how much of ourselves we can take. Now free, now base. Now when boy is moon rock, a blood-brain barrier. Now when I body, now when I farm body, I call it. Now straw, now barn, now sing a digging song. Dig boy, dig moon, pupil pill point, needle blue. Now when dog bite vein, now when plaid shoot soil, what kind of man on the body farm? No heart, no method, no body, no blue. That's my next one. Okay, this is called Horoscopes for Women Like Me. Think of evergreens. Keep trying. You'll find the hours full of pinprick patter. You won't know your own stench. Imagine yourself floating, bow-legged and numb. You'll find celestial bodies will always be manhandled. You'll find your mother's and all mothers' bones dangling on rows of rope, and you'll wonder if that tibia twitching is hers. You won't know. You'll dig your own warren, keep crawling until dirt swallows sound. You'll find you're only one person. When your head flies off in the storm, your knees will wince in sympathy. Constantly practice distortion of perspective. When you confuse yourself with someone else, stay there. Even blades of grass will bicker. Live in the sky. And this will be the last one I read. This is called Autobiography of an Oddity. Let me name the impulse to minimize discomfort, to feel the skin. The subject is nature, to fry what's frozen, drip honey on a block of milk, to punctuate a world that doesn't belong to me. I would squeeze myself through any doorway, trying to come out the right person, and to maximize it too. The subject is will, to bludgeon a landscape, a burst of happiness, arrogance, a dragon need, and knowing where to go. All the words in the correct order, going to the market, catching them at the very last minute. I would smile myself into and out of every situation fast, pretending to be ready. When I said burn, I meant sleep. Please just let me sleep. The subject is time. I was caught unaware, trying to swipe a little treasure. I filled my tires up with snow. There were times it was quiet enough. Thank you. You muted, Tim.
Thank you for telling me that, Danielle. It's only been a year. I'm still trying to figure out the unmute button. But thank you. That was a wonderful reading. It sounds like poetry comes so easily for you. Does it?
Um, I would say the seeds of poetry come easily for me. I tend to get really obsessive and edit and re-edit and re-edit and re-edit. So this very tiny book is something I spent probably about 3 years on, because I love just, going back in and stripping anything that feels like filler. So I would say the impulse comes to me easily. I feel like I have a good intuition for poetry, but I definitely spend a long time editing and crafting.
You were recommended for this series by DeWitt Henry. Now, when DeWitt Henry says something, I listen. So, do you have any connections with DeWitt Henry? Or?
No, Mason Jar Press, who published my book, I reached out to him and asked him to blurb my book. I think that was the connection, but we had never met. Tonight is the first time we're seeing each other face to face.
Okay, well that's great. I know I can't let you go past here without talking about your long distance marriage. Is it still a marriage now, and how did it work?
It's not still a marriage. So it was because of the MFA, actually. I saw in the chat that somebody asked about that. We were living in Minnesota, which was, to me, just the worst place to live. We were living in a, polar vortex winter. I really needed to get out of there. I was like, I just need to do something for myself and go study poetry for 3 years. And, he stayed there for his job. I went to Texas for poetry. The marriage lasted past that, but not past 2020.
So, now when you were in Texas, is Texas the same then as it is now? I mean, Texas is kind of getting a bad rap about things right now, and I wonder why.
I mean, I lived in right outside Austin, so part of that little bubble that's, it's not real Texas.
So have you ever been to South by Southwest? The music?
I've been to the cheap parts of South by Southwest. I've never paid for the full pass, but I've been to the cheap bar parts of it. Yeah, it was fun.
So when you're in your poems, you reference artists and music and lyrics. So what's the connection there? How important is music to you?
I mean, very. I think the musicality of poems is the biggest thing I look for, way more than meaning. I'm never really too concerned with expressing a precise meaning to other people. I'm more concerned with the poem going, feeling it out and leading where the musicality is taking me.
So your book came out in November, and you mentioned that there's some nervousness, and you were just getting your
Hmm.
feet wet, and you didn't do any other readings. Was the nervousness just anxious because it was the first book, or is it because of the pandemic?
Um, the anxiousness, I think, was coming from the fact that I put so much personal stuff into the essays. And, when I'm writing, I never think about anybody hearing it. And just like that just ended up being really wild. Like hearing people say, like hearing my mom say, like, oh, that neighbor of ours from when you were 5, read your stories. And I was like, oh my God, that wasn't somebody I had in mind when I was writing this. Like I wasn't actually imagining like an audience. So it was just kind of that feeling of like feeling exposed and not really feeling ready until recently to really be comfortable with that being out there.
Well, I know people that have had like the childhood that's been sort of like yours, an Italian upbringing with the anxiety. Did writing the poems or writing the essays re-traumatize you in any way, or bring you
Um,
back too
so
much?
I first started seeing a therapist when I was taking a memoir class. Memoir definitely re-traumatized me in a way. And then I first went on medication for anxiety when I took my second memoir class. So I think that really dug it up in a different way for me. I think with poetry, I can like find little outs. Like I can, I lean towards the lyric because I don't always want to say the exact thing. But I think in memoir, I found myself really having to dig into like, what the thing was that I was that I was still struggling with, and so that definitely was something that came up with my therapist, and we talked about ways to like write and then put it away and not let it come through your day with you.
So you're originally from Queens, New York. I'm a
Mhm.
Long Island born and bred, and I went to
I thought
Delaware.
so.
That,
It
that
sounded
beat
like it.
that beat the accent out of me. It sounds you've done a lot of nomadic types of stuff. How long and where were you when you lost most of your Queens? Because Queens accent is pretty it's pretty obvious there.
I think I where did I first move? I think Austin was the first place I moved to out of New York, and I wasn't like conscious at all that I was losing it. But when I came back home, my uncles were like, "You don't sound the same. Like you don't sound like yourself anymore." Yeah.
So how did you end up, or how did you end up doing your MFA at Texas State University?
I think when I took a vacation in Austin, I it was like the first time it really occurred to me that I didn't have to live the chaotic life of being in Queens or Brooklyn or Manhattan, and didn't have to like be surrounded by people constantly and surrounded by noise, and that I could have a bit of a slower life. And I felt that when I vacationed there, and I immediately was like, I have to move here. I have to slow down.
And when you were there, who did you study under, and like, who's part of that MFA program?
Cecily Parks was my thesis advisor. Gabby Calvacaresi didn't teach there, but they were my like outside advisor for my thesis. Cyrus Casals, Deborah Monroe for fiction, Tom Grimes, sorry, for nonfiction, and Tom Grimes for nonfiction as well. I
And
don't know. I just saw the question in the chat. I don't know if there's a swimming pig, but I
yeah,
hope so.
yeah, yeah. I want you just to relax and not read the chat because
Sorry.
I'm feeding. I'm trying to, but no, because I don't want you to multitask. I'm busy multitasking. There's only one person that can multitask here, and just you're doing. You're answering the questions so wonderfully. So at your MFA program, what do you feel that it did to or for your writing? What was the takeaway?
I didn't feel like I knew that much about poetry before I went there. So I went in feeling very in over my head. And I think I, for the first year, probably focused too much on what other people thought of my writing and what the professors were saying, what my classmates were saying. And I think during my second or third year, I finally, felt like I was the one who knew what I was doing with my writing and started to gain some confidence there.
So, question is: doesn't San Marcos have a water park with a swimming pig? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know about the swimming pig. No, I know there's a river. I don't know about the pig.
All right. John also asked, did you ever read "Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking"?
I haven't read it, but I recently listened to an audiobook called Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat During Difficult Times, which similarly, I think, is about the benefits of like pulling back and being on your own, spending a lot of time alone.
Now, you're also a poetry editor at Third Point Press. How has being an editor changed how you write?
That's a good question. I think at first I was a lot more critical of myself, just seeing like how inundated by submissions you get, especially if you're on the submittable discover feature. Once we were on that discover feature, we just were drowning in submissions. But I think it also really made me reconsider, what I really wanted to do and really wanted to communicate with my poetry. And where my starting points were, where my ending points were, and really like overall what the point was and what I was trying to say. I also read for Pithead Papel now. I do prose poetry submissions there, which is fun.
That's a great journal. So, as a editor during the pandemic, are you seeing any new types of poems? A lot of pandemic poems, or people saying things in different ways because of it? Do you think?
So we're on hiatus now because pandemic. But yeah, we had a lot of pandemic poems at first, and a lot of, I think, poems that were sent out more immediately. I think people were just like looking for that emotional connection and not, not having the patience as much to like sit on them. They just wanted them out there. They wanted to speak to somebody right away. Which I also was reading for a journal a few years back called Us for President when Trump was first elected. And so I think I saw the same thing there where it was a lot of very on the nose submissions sent out very quickly. And then the ones that waited a little bit longer were a bit more, reflective, had a bit more distance to look at the issue.
Well, the things that were rushed out, I know that you admire Rachel Richardson's The Warmth in a Messy Place in terms of the revision process.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you revise, do you do that?
The rushing out or the tips from the warmth of a messy place?
The rushing out and then
I
the tip. You can be,
I used to, yeah. I used to just, you like finish something and you have that impulse of like, oh my God, I'm a genius. I want to get this out there right away. And then you look at it like 2 days later and you're like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever written in my life. So I definitely, yeah, had to learn to have some patience with that and, you know, wait until I could get to that point where I could really see it through somebody else's eyes, enough for eyes.
now, when I was looking to find information so I could ask good questions, what I found and what I saw with you was a very modest person. I mean, even your website, there's not too much on it. There's not too much on you. Your bio is very short.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider yourself a modest person, and does being modest help in writing and the writing process?
I think I'm a modest person generally, but also, as I said before we started, I'm a teacher, and I am really, really nervous about students finding any of my work. I use a different name at work, but I wouldn't be too happy about students finding my stuff. So I think I tend to stay a little more private because of that.
And another thing I've heard about your work, and it's always described as honest, and like, we talked about the anxiety and exposing some of the layers of that onion there, and the work is described as honest. So, was there anything you did in the book that dishonestly?
Um, I don't think so, actually. I think the only thing that felt odd to me was when um, the essays were resequenced in a way that it was done to make more sense to the reader. But um, I sort of looked at the sequencing as an emotional arc, and my publishers were sort of looking at in like a chronological arc, and so I think it was the only thing that felt sort of strange to me. Like it didn't quite make sense in order. Um, but I think I'm just compulsively honest, and I'm honest in everything I write. Unfortunately.
As an editor, do you have a certain rubric for the poems you choose? Like what grabs you?
I don't have a rubric, but I look for things that have sort of pulse. things that have a musicality to them, um, things um, that are different from anything I've heard before, things that sort of feel authentic, and things that feel like the author or the poet is very sure of what they're doing, and they're sort of letting the lines lead them rather than trying to, force it into any um, specific form.
Also, who in your MFA program that hasn't put out anything yet that might be putting something out soon? Who is somebody that is a person to watch?
That's a good question. Let me think. I mean, funny. Um, well, this doesn't answer your question, but somebody who did put something out this past year is Emily Beta, who put out a novel called The Body Double, which was really amazing. Um, Somebody who's not out yet.
Or what about a different focus of that question? Do you have a author that you love in general that someone's might not have heard of?
I think. I think probably a lot of you have heard of her, but Matea Harvey is, a favorite of mine. I love like the silliness and the sense of humor that she puts in all of her work.
Which is wonderful because earlier in the comments, DeWitt Henry wrote that your essays are quick-witted. Sometimes you laugh first and think later. So that's rubbed off on you in a very positive way. All right. So now the question I always ask is your book. What is your favorite indie bookstore that needs the business now? Well, except in Texas, you're allowed to go anywhere, any amount of people, so that's fine. So, is there an indie bookstore that's suffering in other areas that doesn't have open door policy yet?
Well, I was going to say, I hope people don't go to it now, but in general, Bookwoman in Bookable, there's so many in Austin, but Bookwoman is a favorite.
All right. I want to thank
Yeah.
Danielle of, and there's her book, Suppose Muscle, Suppose Night, and Suppose This Is August, where you can find at her favorite indie bookstore. But if not, find it elsewhere and pick it up, and it will help the store, it will help Danielle, and it will help. It should help you if you read it, correct? It helps everybody. It's a universal wonderment. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Yeah.
And for the folks that watch this feed on Facebook, thank you very much for being here and watching. Next week at the same time at the same place, you can tune in for essayist and political writer Marty Beckerman, the boy wonder from New York when he was 17, and you can find out how he's grown and what he's learned. So thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to say goodbye to the Facebook people, and thank you very much.